If I ask you to conjure in your mind a silhouette, what do you see? An outline? A shadow on the wall? A silhouette is created when a person or object is illuminated from behind. If I ask you to visualize someone in silhouette, you might think of a figure standing at a window, their features obscured in shadow, making it hard to see who they are. Or you might recall a TV documentary with an interviewee whose identity needs to be concealed. Their face is in shadow, so all you see is a silhouette. You'll find silhouettes used in illustrations when a designer wishes to indicate the presence of a person without it being anybody in particular, an anonymous human head. Silhouettes these days are often associated with anonymity, but perhaps you can also bring to mind a small black cameo portrait from long ago in an oval frame. I don't know how many of you are familiar with such silhouettes, but if you look closely, you get a surprise. They tend to be oddly lifelike and detailed. A realistic portrait of an actual person. Sometimes they almost seem to bring that person back to life, as if they might turn and speak. As you might have gathered, I am fascinated by silhouettes. I've been making a living cutting profile portraits for over 30 years, and I do mean cutting. I'd like to tell you more about these strange black images and how they came to be part of our visual culture. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how to cut a silhouette. To do that, I need a model. I gather Henny has kindly volunteered. Henny, are you available? Can you join me on this red dot, please? Thank you very much. Tell me, have you ever had a silhouette cut before? Well, in that case, I'm very happy to be your first silhouettist. Now, Henny, I need you to stand here, face towards the center of the audience. That is perfect. Cutting a silhouette is simplicity itself. I take a piece of paper in one hand, I take a pair of scissors in the other, and I cut it out. My aim is to cut a portrait of Henny in a single flowing line without drawing or sketching, beginning and ending at the chest. Whilst cutting, I need to think about two things. The first is the shape of the head. I look at the whole shape and the way the head sits on the shoulders, rather than focusing too much on details like the nose or that interesting chin. The shape is where the likeness lies. The second thing is the person. I need to make an instant assessment about somebody I may never have met before. How much truth can this person really take? You see, the thing about cutting rather than drawing is you don't get a second chance. There's no way to rub it out and start again if it goes wrong. You only get one chance with a silhouette. Henny, you can relax. This is for you. I'm going to show this to the camera, so hopefully they can zoom in and see the rest of you. Wait there a second. Does it look like her? Good. I'm so glad you said that, because if it didn't, the rest of this talk would make very little sense. When people see me do this, the first question they usually ask is, how on earth did you discover you could do that? And usually I answer that I just cut and hope. Henny, this is for you. Thank you so much. A big hand for Henny, everybody. Thank you so much. I don't really cut and hope. The truth is that I taught myself to cut silhouettes quite systematically. Many years ago, I left art college as a rather shy and awkward young man, determined to make a living as an artist. Not knowing how else to do that, I set myself up as a street artist in London's Covent Garden, drawing portraits for tourists. It was a simple business. I had an A-frame display stand, a couple of camping stools, some pencils, paper. That was it. Whilst working in Covent Garden, I started, more out of curiosity than anything else, to cut silhouettes. I couldn't find anyone to teach me, so taught myself by adapting my drawing skills. My idea was to draw with scissors. I didn't know then that silhouettes were going to take over my life quite the way they have. As I got better at cutting, I found I wanted, or perhaps needed, to know more. Silhouettes seemed to me like a lost art. Very little was written about them, and I didn't know anybody else making them. Slowly, however, I put together this interesting history. Silhouettes are not as old as you might think. You won't find any reference to them in books on medieval art or even on the European Renaissance. The first professional silhouettists didn't appear until the 18th century. But when they did, they took Europe by storm. Silhouettes were once really popular. Their popularity was fueled in part by a German writer called Johann Caspar Lavater. In 1775, he published a series of essays called A Treatise on Physiognomy. Now, physiognomy is the art of divining a person's character from the shape of their head. It's an old idea, even the ancient Greeks knew about it. It is perhaps based on a perception we all share that we can judge a person's character from appearance, from first impressions. I wonder how many of you here do that from time to time. Physiognomy was an attempt to scientifically codify how we do that. Lavater illustrated his treatise with hundreds of drawings and silhouettes. He divided profiles into sections down the face, writing in great detail which feature related to which character trait. For example, a long aquiline nose indicates a certain rigidity of character, with perhaps the possibility of intellectual achievement. But if the nose is sharp, I've no idea if mine is, it indicates a treacherous or unreliable personality. In this way, your profile was thought to betray who you are. This is the origin of what it means to be profiled or to write a character profile. Physiognomy is the reason the word profile has this odd double meaning, both the shape of your face and a summary of who you are. Physiognomy today, as a science, is completely discredited. It led to widespread racial stereotyping and was taken by some as a scientific basis for racism. Politicians of the day used it to justify slavery as part of a natural order. Nevertheless, physiognomy was hugely popular. Most ordinary people simply regarded it as highly entertaining. Silhouettists set up studios all over Europe, and people flocked to have their profiles taken to be read for character analysis. A bit like having your palm read by a fortune teller. Hundreds of artists were making silhouettes in all kinds of ways. Silhouettes were cut, painted, drawn, and even traced using automatic tracing machines. You see, the silhouettes had to be accurate. The aim was to create an impartial and scientific likeness. To this end, a weird variety of machines were invented. For example, the shadowgraph, which literally traced your shadow, or the physionotrace, which employed a long brass rod physically passed around your face to draw an upside-down silhouette on a small piece of card. In London, a famous attraction was Prosophographus, an automaton seated on a high draped table and dressed as a Spanish artist, which supposedly traced your profile automatically onto a tablet. In reality, under the table was a young artist with a pair of scissors peering out through a hole in the cloth. This history taught me that silhouettes were once regarded, if you'll excuse the obvious pun, as the cutting edge of technology. They represented the very latest in art and science. If this seems odd, pause a moment to consider. In the days before photography, most people had never seen an image of themselves. Only the very wealthiest could afford to commission an oil portrait, a tiny minority. What must that feel like? Surrounded as we are today by images of every kind, it's hard to imagine them not being there. Visual images are an important part of our culture. They're everywhere we look, in the foyer of this building, on advertising hoardings, on the TV screens above you, on the phones in our pockets. We have become visually literate people. All of us can read an image, see what it is, process it, and swipe it away in less than a second. We do that many times every day. 200 years ago, nobody could do that. When they did encounter an image, people needed time to process and understand what it was about. In such a world, the arrival of silhouettes must have appeared completely magical. For the first time, people were able to see and possess an image of themselves. People saw their own profiles. They gained a new understanding of how they seemed to others, which in turn reflected their own self-image. You could have silhouettes made in multiple copies to give away to friends and families. People kept them as souvenirs. They put them in albums. They used them as bookmarks. Silhouettes were everywhere, and everybody wanted one. This is why I like to refer to silhouettes as the 18th-century selfie. For over 100 years, silhouettes were the only kind of self-image that most people ever saw. It wasn't until the invention of the camera in the mid-19th century that another kind of self-image became available. At that point, silhouettes became obsolete, and all the silhouettists either bought a camera or went out of business. Today, you'd be forgiven for thinking of silhouettes as an old, obsolescent art. Yet, I still see them everywhere I go. Even here in Arendal, I see them on restaurant signs. I see them in shop windows. I see them on book jackets, in magazine illustrations. You'll find silhouettes in, on ties, and even cufflinks. I have to warn you, if you spend much time with me, you may start to see them everywhere too. I began by pointing out that silhouettes are often associated with anonymity, which to me feels odd, since early silhouettes were anything but anonymous. Driven by the demands of physiognomy, they were often uncompromisingly accurate. Oil portraits of the day, however, were often touched up or improved to pamper to the vanity of wealthy clients, a bit like a modern-day digital filter applied to an Instagram post. It makes you look great, but is it really you? As an artist, I'm very familiar with this tension between likeness and flattery. I've lost count of the number of times people say to me, "Can you just cut out the double chins?" Or, "Can you trim down the nose a little bit?" So, next time you shy away from your true likeness, or consider applying a filter to a selfie before posting it, please pause to consider this simple lesson from the 18th century, that there is real personality and beauty in your true profile, and that what you consider a flaw may be the very thing which fascinates viewers 200 years from now. Your true likeness is far more valuable than the touched-up version. And finally, if you take nothing else away from this talk, I hope you'll at least see silhouettes in a slightly different light. Thank you for allowing me to share my fascination with you.